Hey there. So it is the DM Robert Gnome over here, and this is going to be a map making session for the new campaign that I am doing, updating Burrow of the Forgotten King. It's a 3.5 edition adventure, and I am updating it to 5e with 5e monsters, and I'm creating the map in TaleSpire. This session is going to focus on the map making in TaleSpire, and I'm going to go over a few things about how I do this. Now, I've done adventures in TaleSpire before. I've done Sunless Citadel, Forge of Fury, sessions of Descent into Avernus, and I have done homebrew for both my last homebrew campaign, Abyssal Anchor, and my next, and the other homebrew adventure, Danger at Greystone, where there was a wizard's observatory, tunnels, etc. Now that I am doing this one, it's going to be 100% online, 100% Tailspire, and updating this. So I thought it was a good way to say, all right, we have the two-dimensional maps from 3.5. We're going to be putting them into 3D over here. Now for my setup, in addition to the printout here, I have my PDFs on my laptop here. That's the booklet. And then I have TaleSpire on this monitor here. So dual monitors when I need to look in more detail about the encounter and the monsters. And look over here. And for the actual screen that I'm sharing, that's going to be TaleSpire. That's over here. Now, the other thing to keep in mind when I'm doing this is the seats feature is not yet released. I started on this before the seats feature was announced, and now I'm finishing it before the seats feature is finalized. But I'll probably be running the campaign after the seats feature is released. So that's just going to be something that I'm going to have to figure out as it happens. I've worked with the sound a little bit. I do believe that I got the sound situated, but if there are problems with this recording, an echo or something else, I apologize. I will learn for the next one. So I will be fast forwarding through parts of this, but what do you say we go ahead and get started? Burrow of the Forgotten King. This is the first act. The Burrow of the Forgotten King is a three-act campaign. The first act is called Burrow of the Forgotten King, but Act 2 and 3 of this adventure are under different parts. I'm focusing on the maps for Act 1, Burrow of the Forgotten King. Now, let me get up and back a little bit. Now, obviously, it's going to be a lot darker. The campaign starts at night, but I'm zooming out and keeping it bright for the map making so that I can see clearly the lines where I'm placing them, the color of things. And then we can make it darker when it's time to play the adventure. At this part here, what I did was I created these clay wall tiles and I used it as like a border. I really like to create the feel that this is actually something that could be placed on a table and actually played with as the minis. And so I think having an actual solid border does two things. One, it gives you a reference for height if you're going to be going down later in the adventure. Then you can say, okay, I know where my floor is, or I know where this is. I'm going to create upwards. In this case, I actually started at the top because I knew everything would be going down. I just didn't really know quite how deep I would eventually make it. So I actually started at the highest point. The adventure takes place in a mountain. By the way, spoiler alert. I probably shouldn't have to say this, but if you ever plan to be a player in this campaign, this map's going to be big spoilers. So only watch this video if you're never going to play in the campaign, or if you've already done it, or if you're planning on running it. Since it happens at the top of the foothills but before the mountains, I'm not going to create the mountains. I'm going to create the map that we're actually playing on, and we're going to create the ground underneath. So I'm going to start at the top where the adventure starts, and then we'll go underneath. Now, this is part one of two maps I'm going to make. I make one map that focuses on strictly what the players are actually going to move around their pieces on. So we're not going to have roofs, we're not going to have the ground above. We're going to do everything with like the open floor. Like if we put this on a table, there would not be uh, there would not be a roof on your map. You would have those things off. It would be strictly the wall so you could reach in and move your piece. TaleSpire currently has the same problem that roofs and second stories typically get in the way and they can be very difficult to move around the piece in during an online game. How I'm going to get around that is I'm going to create the map without the part above. We are starting with the ground where the players will be walking through the graveyard. But when they start getting into buildings, going downstairs, I'm not put they're underground, but I'm not putting the ground tiles above. Once I'm done with this map, I'm going to then copy it and create another one for the sake of completion, for the sake of looking pretty, that's going to have this. This is the same thing I encountered with Sunless Citadel. I used another map, but I almost immediately found out, if you played Sunless Citadel, spoiler alert, you have three layers to it. You have above ground, you have underground, and then you have beneath it. If you would, the surface, the underground, and then the underdark, if you would. These are the three. So what I actually did was I did two things. I removed the ground on the part that would be the underground because they did not overlap. The part on the surface, you go down a ravine and then you go into a cave. I removed the ground above the cave. Then I did with them. Then I took all of that off for the part where they went beneath, so that I wouldn't have these extra layers on top of layers affecting what I was trying to show where they were moving. I didn't have unnecessary rooms, making it more confusing and more lost. I created multiple maps. It was much easier to hide layers, move things as we went. So I'm going to be doing the same thing here. I'm creating the first map, which is playable. Then I'm going to copy this when I need to create additional, when I need to, when I want to make it look fancy, look pretty. I'll already have the playable copy saved here, and then I'll create another one. So as we go on, I haven't created all of the, well, first off, I created this little slope here. You can see it actually creates the feeling that you're going up the hills, that you're actually gone up, and it allows us to kind of set the mood. We can go ahead and make it darker or foggier as they come in, and we can focus more on sounds. And speaking of which, let's go over here to atmosphere settings, and let's be a little festive for this video. Alright, I do believe, yep, there it goes. There's our bars playing. Alright, so now I created some of these, sunk some of the walls in, kind of creates the feeling that this is old, ancient, and this is going to be the walkway, and then we get over here to the first encounter. Notice that we do not have the roof here. Notice how it just kind of goes in. And so this encounter is going to be played out without the roof here. It's going to play out off to the sides, and I'll make those parts to the side later. We go down the stairs. A little piece of advice that I'm going to give for this part here, be careful when you create these, that whatever you put on the map are things you're going to describe. It kind of creates a distraction, if you would, if you're going to put things in here for them to find that you did not describe when they entered the room. So the bodies, the rubble, these are things that I'm going to mention are here. And then the map, the fact that they're there just kind of adds to just where they are. But I like to emphasize that just because a desk is empty or doesn't have anything on top, that's just the map. That doesn't mean that it's actually empty. So actually ask about those details about what you see. And, oh, gotta remember, I gotta use this because we're so high up. And tilt. And these are going to be the walls of caskets, and this is where the counter goes. Now keep in mind with some of these torches, what I'm doing is setting a mood. So watch, if you would. And then bad guys, I will give a torch effect. I'll place the mini. Let's go ahead and let's go to the undead here. They have expanded a bit, but actually, more appropriately, let's go to skeleton overthrow. So while this is dark here now, once the encounter actually starts, I'm going to create a torch so that it's obvious that he is there now. Maybe the lighting doesn't really actually happen in the game. Maybe they're relying on dark vision or casting a spell. But I think that it's good to have this so that they know where things are, even if they can't see it as a character. And this way, it's actually a dark alley. It's actually a dark corner. And then when combat starts, we can create the torches to kind of make it clear, you do have this bad guy, you do have that bad guy. Just because something's dark doesn't mean you take the map off the table in person game. So try to keep that in mind. So with that said, we go back to bright for the sake of making the map. Alright, and now we get into some of the detail. So one of the things to keep in mind as we're going through this, as I'm building, is that I do not like to have hallways that are single column, one narrow. It creates a real conflict when you have a larger group. So unless it's an intentional, like for the environment, you need to be very careful about that so that it does not create too crowded of an effect. Let's create a bit of a regal door here. This is not something that they should be going through. Let's exit the window and see that open. Right. Then to build mode. Alright, so the control is going to bring it down. And here we go. We're creating a room that is essentially I need 4 spaces beyond this. And I can count it. So there's one down. So and then we're going to create 1 extra space around here. Partially for when you need to hide it, it's nice to have extra little spaces so that we can move the cursor, pinpoint, okay, this is the area I want to hide and feel immediately. And then let's go ahead and figure it out. We have it here, so build mode. Alright. The other thing to keep in mind, player characters are going to occupy a whole square, so mark your walls as appropriate so that there's still enough space for them to move around. Like for here, I'm kind of creating it a little long, but that way from where they sit, it's going to look accurate. And you're going to see what I mean here when too deep, I'm going to create this one here. Now this is supposed to be a bit of a tight encounter. They're not supposed to have an abundance of space. This is really a room that they should not be going into. So that's part of why I'm keeping it very, very tight. Alright, create the crypts now. was looking for. This one I'm looking for them. There it is under containers, this gaskets. So we're going to create two of these. A little deep because it's a tight room. And then I need a statue. And considering what this is, I think it would be appropriate if we have this woman holding a bowl. I'm going to put that down there. And then I'm going to create some little bit of light just because we have these walls here. So I don't want them to be blinded. I don't want the shadows to throw this off. So I'm going to give the light, even if it's just for the sake of illustrating the corners of the building. In fact, as we, since the statue is important, I'm going to put a little light in there. And I'm going to put another one right over here. And the reason for that is you can easily see how the shadows would overrule it. But if you had a dark atmosphere, you can still make out the corners of it. You don't like that though. Alright. Then, alright, so after this is going to go downhill some more. So let's turn this around. Alright, so what I'm doing here is finding a different trap. I don't like the trap that was in the book, so I'm taking one called, this is actually in the DMG. Oh, actually, no, it's in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and we're going to copy it. And I'm going to create so I'm going to create actually a new board to paste this in. I'm going to remove it, and this is going to be the trap. Okay, now that we kind of know how it's going to lay out, we know that the numbers are going to progress, the letters are going to progress. I want it to face that way. So this puzzle's in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I think it's a little bit more straightforward. And considering that the campaign starts at an earlier, a lower level, I think it's better to have a more straightforward puzzle than one that might throw people off, especially if it's an intro game. So we are going to go back to the other board, back to the graveyard board. Alright, so now that we know which way we want it to face, there we go. See, we're already facing the right direction. Are we? Yeah, we're facing the right direction. So let's level it up. Alright, I gotta bring this up a little bit in order to do this. bit of finesse. Alrighty. So there we go. Let's get the music back on, and let's put on Wizard's Tale for this part. I got interrupted there, and I didn't actually. I forgot to continue on the record, so apologies. That's embarrassing, really, as I really liked what I had done. Right over here, created water. This is a little water trap here. Monster's gonna hide in here. It's an ooze, and I use these to create a rope bridge. So as you come down the stairs, we're going to remove the walls because they could be a complicated encounter. But then there's a rope bridge here. We put some stalagmites, whatever you pronounce them, protruding from the water. And there's a rope bridge that an ooze will come from the water to attack from. In this room, when we get over here, this is actually a little important. This is the room where grave robbers, the antagonist, first came in. They came in from above, and then they came down. So hypothetically, if the party wanted to search around on the top, this is an entrance where they could find and then go down and then avoid a lot of trouble or come in from behind on some of the enemies. Now, this is something that in TaleSpire would be very unique to create, but also very complicated given the 3D aspect of it. It's not something that they really had in mind when they created some of these maps. It's just how this would come up from below. So I'm going to leave it as is, but the important part is this is not an area we want to build things above or below. We want to try to keep this spot here vacant both up and down, so that we can continue to create it. And later we'll create this tunnel and it'll connect straight up to the big statue on the graveyard above. So, on now. This is another tough one because what they want to create is an 8-sided room. And that's just not something that's really feasible, and also map-wise, your minis, they fit in squares, they don't fit in triangles. So it's going to look a little awkward. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to create some curvatures so that we can still get the aesthetic of it being rounded, but without the complications. So this is going to be a 9 by 9 space. I want to get that 9 by 9 space in, and then want to round out the corners of it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to essentially, this is 11 wide, so the ends are going to be cut off, and that's where the walls are going to be. And then we're going to have the 9 squares inside, 9 by 9. I'm going to round corners, and that's going to create the aesthetic we want, that it's a rounded room. And then we'll have the space to place the interior walls, the interior statues, so that people they can still move around in there. And if it's a little wide, that's actually good because if you notice, these walls do take up space. They're not paper thin, and that doesn't necessarily convey well when you have a map that's 5 by 5 squares and you want a wall in between, but the wall takes up part of the squares, and so it leads to some confusion. So, okay. We, this is what we need. So we need this. This is going to be, should have placed this out a little differently. Here we go. Oh, get you into So while this is not perfect, I know I can't really show you. I guess I can. Yeah, you can see how it might not be perfect. It's not an octagon, but it does kind of convey. And we're focusing on the space coming in from the door and some of the tactical abilities that they'll have around. So they come in, they can still do kind of a sweeping attack to get around to the other enemies, or they come back. So making sure that they have space in the areas that they would from the good guys' approach. That, and so let's move straight overhead and let's fill in the props. This is where it actually gets much deeper. So we're going to definitely do this as kind of a very descending stairwell. I'm also judging a bit on my space here. And I'm trying to see, zoom over. Can I zoom out? Okay, so this is where we're approaching from. So I have some space that way, but I don't want to come over. But my next part of the adventure goes downhill, and it goes mostly in a straight line with a bit of a turn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as an excuse to bring the map downward and to rotate it. Like I said, I want to avoid this space that's right here. So we're going to make sure that we make it a wide kind of turn this way that comes around, another small turn so that keeps going. Map is actually a clockwise turn that happens down the road. So we'll try to make this kind of like a U-turn so that the clockwise turn can continue down in this area over here. I'm not actually going to add the walls because I'd rather keep this clear and conveyed well, partially because what I'm trying to convince at this point is that this is also a good stopping point. This is a part where they can take a long rest rather easily. So additional walls that make it seem congested, crowded, or just overall, uh, you know, imply that it would not be safe. But creating a bunch of empty rooms in this way conveys a few things. One, it turns the map the way I want it. Two, it conveys that this is a good spot to take a long rest. After this point, there are some environmental challenges that can happen. So letting them cool down. Also thinking that not everything's their enemy is a good at this point. And then it also conveys that they're just getting much deeper. The map is much further down than they thought. It's much larger than they thought. So it kind of sets the tone that, hey, this isn't just a few grave robbers and we're going to finish this and head to the next location, but it starts to really set the scope. And that does kind of say, oh, those guys we just killed, those aren't the final bad guys. There's more down below. We should probably rest here. In this last structure here so that they get a good idea that, hey, you know what, you might start having some underdark beasts in here as well. So this is something that I want to start having this kind of a glamorized look. So we're going to switch to a different tile set. I do want it to have a little bit of dark, so not the polished one. And we're going to keep this extra square space for the walls, just to kind of better convey the change, and so I can better hide the room, if you would. So let's actually do. Let's do these. I like how it looks polished. It conveys it differently, but that it's not the solid white marble. So we have those two spaces. We create a space to the side. I'm going to create one extra square to kind of create the gap in the walls so that I can change the walls. That needs to be. Oh, that's a drop. mistake here. What I have to do in order to fix it is going to be a little weird. I'm going to finish the bottom part of this, then I'm going to copy this whole slab, and I'm going to rotate it, because this room, I confused the entry from the exit. The way this was written now in 3.5, very different than the way that they do it in 5. So I'm going to turn this around, and then it's actually going to point the direction I was needing it to avoid bumping into the other room. Yeah, that will actually do it. And then exit this way right onto this spot that I need to keep clear. So let me make a few additional tiles and lower those. So what I need to do is I need to create a bottom level lower than this. So here we go. I'm going to put this here so that it does not, oh shit, I didn't get it low enough. So let's go back. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to create it much lower. So what we have to do is we got to start at the top left. You have to grab it low. So in fact, let's catch a little bit of this. I'll just have to remove it later perhaps. And then copy slab. Alright, first things first. Move this one over here just in case anything happens and we still have a copy to use. Now, we'll take this whole thing, go down, cut it. Okay. There we go. So the entrance needs to be these two parts up here. These. So let's cut two. So make it just slightly lower. Tail it off just a tad, so we have some space to work with to connect them. Alright, we still have our canal, which is what's important. So now we can actually zoom and get closer. Actually, I do not mind this at all. This actually seems like it's going to work out very well. So let's resume. I think I missed a little bit there and not hitting the record button. So let's go back a little bit. So I think I may have lost a little bit of y'all. I went from a break and I don't think I hit play after that. So here's what we're gonna do. Let's rewind a little bit. I'm pretty sure I already went over the canal here. So this room, I'm kind of keeping it a little bare. This is going to be one where they either detect something there, something's listening to them. So keeping it empty like this allows it to be a bit more of a make a perception check, or do you just assume it's empty because you think it is? And so that allows for a little more clever play. So I don't want to overly distract them with little details. It also gives them a chance for lore because there's going to be inscriptions on these doors. These statues here of ancient heroes that's going to be important to them later on. So that's why this is kind of bare. Here is where we're going to get into a combat area. So this is going to be a little bit more fun. It's going to be interesting to do because over here it's multi-level. They come down a level and then there's enemies in the room. So there's a chance that as they climb, can they climb down? Can they climb down in a stealth manner? These are going to be important parts. So this room is going to be a bit long, and then there's going to be some bodies there. So that's going to be a bit important to remember. Probably going to take a break and read through the decorations, the sceneries, what's dead bodies, what all statues, etc. And probably not going to broadcast that just because it gets a little boring. I'm just going back and forth through statues and skeletons, putting them in there. Not the best stuff to upload. So I'm actually going to make a stop at the moment. This is going to get to, for two reasons. First off, this has a lot of little decorations, a little scenery of bodies, statues, things to implement. There's a fountain in here. So I'm actually going to pause this for now and going to read through it and make little notes of, oh, I wanted this, I want that. But recording me as I just watch and review the campaign notes is not very entertaining. Also, after this part is where we get into some water elements. And what I really like is that TaleSpire has a certain water level. So I'm going to actually do that as a different part. I'm probably going to create a different board so that it's complete, and so I create the water level and not just seem like it's an isolated piece, but it'll lay out a lot of flat tile so that when the water comes up, it doesn't look like I added a whole ocean. I just added it at that part, and so that I can play around with the water in that scene without affecting the rest of this. So I'm gonna stop at the moment, and yeah, just kind of refresh and then make some decisions about what I'm doing